Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are really digging into something special. We're going deep on a specific line of effects pedals.
That's right. We're looking at the BRS Air PS series of pitch shifters. PS2, PS3, PS5, and PS6.
Yeah, these little compact boxes. But this isn't just about pedals, is it? It's kind of a window into, well, the whole evolution of digital guitar sounds.
Exactly. It's basically a 4-decade history of digital signal processing, or DSP, crammed into that classic BAW-SS footprint. We're turning how things went from, pretty basic and maybe a bit glitchy to incredibly powerful.
So our mission, if you will, is tracing that journey. We start back in the late 80s with sounds that were, well, let's call it creatively crunchy.
Oh, yeah, crunchy is a good word for it. Full of character.
Right, and we follow that all the way up to today's super clean polyphonic sounds, the kind of precision stuff pros need now.
And it's a fascinating story because you see how musicians took what were, frankly, technical limitations back then and turned them into signature sounds, into art, really.
That's the core of it, isn't it? That tension, pitch shifting, doing it well in real time, that takes serious processing power.
Oh, absolutely. It's complex stuff.
Yeah.
So when Baez first managed to shrink it down, well, the results were messy, but like you said, creatively messy.
Creative chaos. I like that.
Yeah, that's what the early ones offered, driven by the limits of the hardware. Then, as the tech got better, faster, more powerful, you shift towards musical precision.
So it's chaos versus precision, tracking that balance across these four pedals.
Pretty much. We're watching DSP grow up, basically, from this kind of experimental novelty into something indispensable.
Okay, let's map it out then. We'll tackle it generation by generation. First up, the PS2. The dawn of digital grit, as we're calling it.
Right. The PS3, which is, well, it's a legend, the cult classic, ambient chaos machine.
Then the PS5, where things took a turn towards performance and precision, getting serious.
And finally, the current one, the PS6, which is all about modern polyphony and, purity of sound.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
Let's dive in.
Okay. Let's start at the beginning. Back when digital was still kind of the Wild West. Noisy, exciting, full of possibilities.
Right. So 1988, the BRS PS2 digital pitch shifter delay hits the scene. And reading about it, it really was groundbreaking, wasn't it? Like one of the first times you could get this kind of effect in a standard pedal.
Yeah, absolutely. Before that, pitch shifting was mostly big, expensive studio rack gear. Putting it on a pedal board, that was a big move.
So what was under the hood? What made it tick back in 88?
Well, context is key. Digital tech was still pretty primitive compared to now. And pricey. BAW-SS didn't, invent this stuff from scratch for the pedal. They adapted existing Roland DSP.
Roland being the parent company, of course.
Exactly. It was basically derived from their RPS-10 rack unit. They managed to squeeze, well, some of that power into the compact format.
And the core of it was a 16-bit processor. Now, for listeners maybe not deep in the tech weeds, 16-bit audio, what does that actually sound like?
It sounds like early digital. 16-bit gives you functional audio, but it's got limits. The dynamic range isn't huge. The resolution isn't super fine, so you kind of hear the digital process working.
Right. It leaves fingerprints on the sound.
Definitely. That lower resolution, it translates directly to the tone. It makes things sound a bit coarser, maybe grainy, sometimes a little metallic, especially as notes fade out.
So not exactly smooth or transparent.
No, not at all. But back then, that was the sound of digital pitch shifting. It wasn't seen as a flaw, more like just how it was, its character.
But the PS2 was clever for its time, wasn't it? It wasn't just a pitch shifter.
Right, that was key. It had that dual function, pitch shifter and digital delay. They often shared the same chip, basically switching modes. That made it more versatile, more bang for your buck.
So what could it actually do in terms of shifting and delay?
The pitch shifting was pretty basic by today's standards. You had 3 main intervals you could dial in, plus or minus an octave, with a bit of fine-tuning. But the delay mode was actually pretty decent for a compact pedal then. You could get up to around 2 seconds of delay time, which was quite a lot.
2 seconds is pretty long, even now for some delays.
It is. And that combination, the shifter plus the long delay, that's really important for how people ended up using it.
Yeah, the sources really highlight how players started messing with its limitations, like trying to shift full chords. Didn't really work, did it?
No, not cleanly. It couldn't really track complex stuff well. Chords would often just dissolve into this.
Yeah.
Well, digital mud is a good description someone used. Glitchy.
But then there's the feedback knob.
Ah, yes. The feedback. That's where the experimental side really came out. See, because the processing wasn't perfect, when you crank the feedback, the repeats weren't clean copies.
They degraded.
Exactly. Each repeat got a little more chewed up, maybe shifted pitch slightly on its own, so you could push it into self-oscillation and get these amazing, evolving drones, things that would spiral up or dive down in pitch all by themselves.
Accidental ambient machine.
Kind of. It was built on those imperfections, so the overall sound profile. You've got that inherent latency, that slight delay before the effect kicks in.
Noticeable,
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. And you've got that grainy, metallic texture. It wasn't built for crystal clarity.
But perfect for certain things.
Absolutely. Great for, like, a vintage-style detune, thickening things up, or adding a subtle octave shimmer that wasn't too clean, or even just a slightly weird, warbly pseudo-chorus sound.
And that sound became kind of iconic for certain genres back then, late 80s, early 90s.
Definitely. Think experimental stuff, early shoegaze, post-punk bands looking for texture, that slightly broken, lo-fi digital thing. They embraced it.
Yeah.
The PS2 really showed that imperfections could be musical fuel.
Let's set the stage. Proved that a pitch shifter didn't need to be perfect to be cool, just needed to be interesting.
And the PS2 is definitely interesting. It laid the groundwork for what came next, which, well, that took things to a whole other level.
Okay, so if the PS2 was the slightly rough experimental start, the PS3, which landed in 1994, feels like where things really exploded. This one has achieved, like, proper cult status.
Oh, absolutely. Undisputed cult classic. If the PS2 laid the foundation, the PS3 built this wild, sprawling cathedral of sound on top. It's still hugely sought after.
So technically, what was the big leap from PS2 to PS3?
Couple of key things. First, they bumped the processing up from 16-bit 24-bit DSP.
Okay, so higher fidelity, cleaner sound.
Yeah, definitely cleaner. Better dynamic range, less noise. The basic quality of the audio improved quite a bit. Still digital sounding, for sure, but a noticeable step up in clarity.
But that wasn't the biggest change, was it?
No, the real game changer, the thing that totally redefined what this pedal could do, was adding stereo processing and stereo outputs.
Ah, right. Huge difference. The PS2 is just mono.
Exactly. Suddenly you could send your dry sound one way, the effect the other, or use the stereo field to create these huge, swirling, moving textures. That width, it's absolutely essential for ambient, dreamy sounds.
Totally. Opens up so much space.
It really does. But beyond the stereo aspect, the PS3 just crammed in so many creative options. It wasn't just pitch, shift, and delay anymore. It had, wait for it, 11 distinct modes.
11. Wow. Not just 8, like some sources say.
11, yeah. Covering pitch shifting, delay, detuning, and all sorts of weird combinations. That complexity is part of its charm and maybe part of why it's so revered.
So what were some of the standout modes, the ones that really define the PS3 sound?
Well, you had your improved pitch shifting and detune, but Mode 7 was this really interesting pitch shift plus delay combo that was super interactive. Then you had the really out there stuff.
Like
Mode 10 is maybe the most famous. It did this kind of reverse style pitch shifting feedback loop thing. It could create these incredible swelling backward sounding textures like a tape loop melting in slow motion, just otherworldly.
Okay, that sounds wild. And they added an expression input too.
Yes, finally. That was crucial. You could hook up an expression pedal and sweep the pitch in real time on some modes. Suddenly, it wasn't just a set and forget effect. You could play the pedal. It became much more interactive, more musical than the PS2 ever could be.
So that's why people started seeing it less as just an effect and more like an instrument in its own right?
Absolutely. Because its sound was so unique, it's often described as dreamy, but also glitch-prone, unpredictable.
But unpredictable in a good way, like musical glitches.
Kind of, yeah. Unlike the PS2, where glitches felt like digital errors, the PS3's glitches often sounded beautiful, like a sudden shimmer or a weird flutter in the pitch or the stereo image just momentarily warping. It kept you on your toes, but often in inspiring ways.
And that sound just became synonymous with certain genres, particularly shoegaze.
Oh, totally. You can't top PS3 without mentioning shoegaze. Kevin Shields from My Bloody Valentine is probably the most famous user.
What did he and others in that scene do with it?
They leaned into the instability. Shoegaze is all about those massive, swirling, layered textures where everything blurs together. Shields would apparently use the detune modes, crank the feedback, and just let the pedal generate these huge, liquid, almost breathing sounds.
Exploiting the chaos.
Exactly. Even the tracking issues. Yeah, it still didn't track chords perfectly clean. But now, because of the stereo field and the improved processing, those artifacts often sounded smeared and lush, part of the texture rather than just noise.
So it was incredibly creative, but still maybe not precise.
Definitely not precise. There was still noticeable latency, the artifacts were still there, and dialing it in could be tricky.
How so?
The controls were super interactive. Sometimes tweaking the balance knob would subtly change the pitch interval, or the delay time would shift slightly depending on the mode. Getting the exact same sound twice could be a real challenge.
Which some players probably hated.
Oh, sure. If you needed consistency, it could be frustrating. But for sound explorers, that unpredictability, that difficulty, that was the magic. It forced you to find happy accidents.
And that's why it's still so loved. Because nothing else quite sounds like it.
Pretty much. That specific blend of dreamy, glitchy stereo chaos, they never quite replicated that DNA again. It's a true one-off.
Okay, so we move into the 2000s. The musical landscape is shifting again. Maybe a bit less about pure texture, more focus on technical skill, live reliability.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And BiSS responds to that. Around the year 2000, they released the PS5 Super Shifter. And this pedal really marks a major shift in philosophy for the series.
How so? Less chaos, more control.
Exactly. The PS5 is where the focus pivots away from the wild, unpredictable textures of the PS3 and firmly towards accuracy, stability, and features designed for live performance. It was about making the pitch shifter a reliable tool, not just an experimental toy.
Okay, so technically what enabled that shift?
Another jump in processing power, moving up to 32-bit DSP this time, which is a better, cleaner again. But the really crucial development wasn't just the bit depth, it was the implementation of proper real-time pitch detection.
Right, what does real-time pitch detection actually mean compared to what the PS2 and PS3 were doing?
The earlier pedals were using clever algorithms to sort of estimate the pitch of the note coming in. The PS5 had dedicated processing power to actively analyze and identify the note being played almost instantly.
So it wasn't guessing anymore.
Much less guessing, much more knowing. That drastically cut down the latency, the delay between playing and hearing the effect, and massively improved the accuracy, especially tracking notes up and down the neck.
And that improved accuracy, that musical intelligence, that's what allowed for the big headline feature of the PS5.
The intelligent harmony mode, absolutely. This was a huge deal for a compact pedal at the time.
What did it let you do?
You could actually select a musical key like C major or A minor, and then when you played a melody line, the pedal would generate a harmony note, like a third or a fifth above or below, that fit correctly within that key.
So no more weird dissonant harmony notes by accident.
Mostly, yeah. It made it sound much more like a planned, composed harmony part, like having a second guitarist playing along perfectly in key. For solo artists or bands without a second guitar player, that was incredibly useful for fattening up solos or riffs.
Transformed it from just a texture thing into a compositional tool almost.
Definitely. And the performance features didn't stop there. They kept the expression pedal input, but now it was properly integrated for things like the pitch bend mode.
For doing whammy-style effects.
Exactly. Smooth, controlled pitch dives and rises, controllable with your foot. Much more stable and predictable than trying to wrestle similar sounds out of the PS3.
And what other modes did it have?
It had a dedicated detune mode for thickening, a flutter mode for simulating faster pitch warbles, and even a tremolo arm mode designed to mimic the subtle pitch dips you get using a vibrato bar on a guitar. It was all about practical, usable sounds for performers.
And the overall tone, compared to the PS3's dreaminess.
Much cleaner, more stable. Still digital, you could tell it was an effect, but it was a reliable, clear digital sound designed to work well in a live mix. Less character perhaps, but more functional.
So the use case really shifted. Less ambient exploration, more practical application.
Yeah. Players were using it for those intelligent harmonies on solos, for precise whammy bar effects without needing a separate whammy pedal, for controlled dive bombs. It became a real workhorse on lots of professional pedal boards.
A big success then.
Huge commercial success, especially for live players. But there was a trade-off, as always.
The clinical sound.
Yeah, that's a word that comes up. By cleaning everything up, making it so precise and predictable, it lost that organic, slightly dangerous, unpredictable magic the PS3 had. Some people miss the chaos.
And I read the detune mode was maybe a bit limited too.
That's right. It was designed for subtle thickening, so it only offered a very narrow range of pitch shift, usually just plus or minus 25 cents or so. You couldn't get those really wide, seasick detuning sounds the PS3 could do.
Which kind of tells you where their priorities were with the PS5.
Exactly. It was optimized for musical utility within standard performance context, not necessarily for pushing the absolute sonic boundaries, but it really set the standard for what a modern, reliable harmonizer pedal should be. It became the dependable choice.
Which brings us right up to the current iteration, the PS6 Harmonist, launched back in 2010. This feels like the culmination, taking ideas from all the previous versions and packing them into one unit.
Yeah, the PS6 is definitely the modern flagship. It aims to do everything shifting, harmonizing, detuning, whammy effects, but with the absolute latest tech BOSS had at the time.
And the tech here is another step up, right? Still 32-bit, but different.
Right. It's 32-bit floating point DSP. And that floating point part, while sounding technical, makes a really significant difference compared to the standard 32-bit fixed point processing in the PS5.
Okay, break that down for us. Why does floating point matter so much?
Okay, think of it like this. Standard digital audio has a fixed ceiling and floor for how loud or quiet signals can be represented accurately. Floating point processing is much more flexible. It can handle incredibly quiet signals and incredibly loud signals with the same high level of precision and detail.
So better dynamic range and detail, even when it's doing complex calculations.
Exactly. It maintains the integrity of your original guitar tone much better, even when it's doing really heavy lifting, like shifting multiple notes at once, which leads us directly to the absolute killer feature of the PS6.
Don't tell me. Polyphony.
Polyphonic pitch detection. Finally, this is the quantum leap that separates the PS6 from everything that came before it in the PS line.
So what does that mean in practice? You can play chords through it.
Yes. You can play full chords, major, minor, complex, jazz voicings, whatever. And the PS6 can analyze all the notes in that chord and shift them accurately together without turning it into a glitchy mess.
Wow, that's huge. The older ones just couldn't handle chords cleanly at all.
Not really, no. They were designed primarily for single note lines. Polyphony was kind of the holy grail for compact pitch shifters, and the PS6 delivered it.
So what does that unlock musically?
Well, the harmony mode becomes incredibly powerful. You can select a key and interval, and it generates harmonies up to 2 extra voices that track your chord progressions cleanly. Creates these amazing, thick, layered guitar sounds.
The instant 3-guitar harmony section.
Pretty much. And the detune mode benefits too. You can apply subtle detuning to full chords for that lush, wide, chorus-like effect, and it works beautifully without warbling or glitching.
Okay, impressive. But there's usually one standout feature that defines these pedals.
Yeah.
What's the PS6's party trick?
That would have to be the S-bend mode, super bend.
Right. What's super O about it?
It takes the pitch bend idea from the PS5, but ramps it up significantly. Using the pedal's foot switch or an expression pedal, you can do these massive, sweeping pitch bends up to plus or minus 3 octaves.
3 octaves. That's enormous.
It is. And crucially, because of that floating point DSP, it does these huge sweeps incredibly smoothly and quickly with amazing clarity. You can go from subterranean lows to dog whistle highs almost instantly, and the tone holds together.
Okay, that sounds like serious sonic weaponry. I can see why players like Nels Cline use it.
Yeah, it offers both subtle harmony detune and extreme sound mangling potential in one box. The overall tonal profile is just crystal clear. Very low latency, very stable, very natural sounding harmonies that blend well.
The peak of digital purity, perhaps.
You could say that. It really fulfills the promise of clean, accurate, powerful digital pitch shifting in a compact pedal. But
There's always the but.
there's always a bit. That absolute clarity, that perfection, it inherently lacks the grit, the warmth, the character of something like the PS3. The happy accidents are mostly gone.
Yeah, the sources point that out. It's objectively better in almost every technical way, but maybe less inspiring for some.
Potentially. And another subtle point. Its harmony mode relies on those fixed key settings for accuracy, which is great for playing standard diatonic music, but it makes it a bit harder to stumble into weird atonal or modal harmonies compared to the older units where you just dialed in an interval and hope for the best.
So less room for experimental chaos.
Well, a little less, perhaps. It's the ultimate refinement, the peak of controlled precision. It finally solved the polyphony problem for compact pedals, proving you could get studio-grade processing on your board.
So looking back across these 4 pedals, it's quite a journey. From that grainy, almost broken sound of the late 80s digital right up to the super clean, powerful processing of the 2010s.
It really maps the evolution of DSP in microcosm, doesn't it? We can kind of boil it down.
Let's do it. Quick summary.
Okay, PS2, 1988, 16-bit, based on the RPS-10 rack, key sound, grainy, metallic, lo-fi, plus that delay, defined by limitations.
Right.
PS3, 1994, jumps to 24-bit, adds stereo, 11 modes, key sound, dreamy, glitchy, unpredictable ambient chaos. The cult classic, its instability was its strength.
The icon.
PS5, 2000, the pivot, standard 32-bit, adds real-time pitch detection. Key features, intelligent harmony, pitch bend. Key sound, clean, precise, stable, maybe a bit clinical, built for performance.
Got it.
And finally, PS6, 2010 onwards, 32-bit floating point DSP, a big breakthrough. Polyphony, key features, polyphonic harmony and detune, superbend, key sound, crystal clear, smooth, accurate, powerful, ultimate precision.
Seeing it laid out like that really highlights the BIOS philosophy across these decades, that constant balancing act you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. Balancing the desire to enable creative chaos, letting players find weird textures, push boundaries, like with the PS2 and especially the PS3.
Yeah.
Against the need to provide musical precision, giving performers reliable, accurate tools for harmony and effects, like the PS5 and PS6 delivered.
And what this whole deep dive really underlines, I think, is how technology and art feed off each other. Sometimes limitations create the art.
Absolutely. The 16-bit grit, the latency, the tracking glitches of the early pedals, those weren't bugs. They became features. They accidentally defined the sound of genres like shoegaze because artists worked with those flaws.
While the later breakthroughs, like Polyphony and the PS6, enabled sounds and performance styles that just weren't possible before.
Yeah.
Clean chord harmonies, massive stable pitch bends.
Right. It allowed for a different kind of creativity, one based on control and complexity rather than embracing imperfection.
And it's fascinating that even today, you've got players who will hunt down and pay top dollar for a vintage PS3 because of its flaws, for that unique texture.
While other pros absolutely rely on the PS6 for its pristine accuracy and power. Two sides of the same coin.
It really is. The whole series tells a story about what guitarists value in effects. Sometimes it's character, sometimes it's control. Hashtag tag tag outro.
Okay. That brings us towards the end of this deep dive.
And thinking about that duality, the flawed beauty versus the pristine perfection, leads to maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on.
Go for it. Given that the PS3, with all its quirks and unpredictability, still inspires boutique pedal builders today, people actively trying to capture some of that vintage digital dirt.
Great. You see PS3-inspired pedals all the time.
Exactly. So does the absolute crystal clear, technically perfect precision of something like the PS6, does that ultimately leave less room for those happy accidents? For the kind of unexpected, maybe even profound musical discovery that comes from wrestling with imperfect technology?
Is the perfect sound sometimes less interesting, less inspiring than the perfectly imperfect one?
That's the question. Something to think about.
A great question to end on. Well, thank you for joining us on this pretty comprehensive journey through the BIOS PS series. Hopefully it gave you some insight into how these iconic pedals evolved.
Yeah, it's been fun digging back through these.
We definitely encourage you, if you get the chance, to maybe check out some demos or even try these pedals yourself. Hearing the differences really tells the story. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.